back to our live shot of Tokyo Bay at night, a city that poised to host the Olympic Games in the summer of 2020, July 24th, opening ceremony set. But of course, the coronavirus pandemic has changed everything for all of us around the world, and this morning it is affecting the Olympic Games. The announcement coming just minutes ago that the Games will be postponed until no later than the summer of 2021. That confirmation from the IOC. I'll bring you the IOC statement in just a second. But it's not a cancellation. There are still plenty of questions about what this means for the organizing committee, for the athletes, and no better person to answer the questions than Canada's Richard Pound, or Dick Pound, as we know him variously. Longtime member of the IOC since 1978. He has been speaking very forthrightly, as he always does, about this issue, predicting that it would be postponed, and indeed it has. So in Montreal with me this morning, Dick Pound, I'm just delighted to have some time with you. Thank you for joining us.
Morning. Fun to be with you.
As I said, publicly just yesterday, you were saying there would be a postponement, and it was officially announced just moments ago. What's your assessment?
Well, I think it's the right decision in the circumstances. It's not an easy decision, and that will create some complications, but it's certainly better than exposing all your athletes to a dangerous situation. So it was a tough call, but I think both the Japanese authorities and the IOC have done the right thing and done it in plenty of time so that people will understand what's going on.
What are the complications it creates?
Well, that's part of the discussions that have to occur. I mean, one of the things will be how many of the facilities that were planned for 2020 will still be available in 2021, because, you know, in efforts to avoid the proverbial white elephants, there'd be forward contracts that affect many of the facilities, many of the Olympic Village and other contractual arrangements they have for future use. So some of those will have to be examined and perhaps slightly untied, and the international sport calendar will have to be rejigged because most of the international federations have their 2021 programs pretty well set. So, but I think there'll be lots of cooperation there because everybody wants the Olympics to be held and to benefit from the enormous audiences that you have, rather than the minimal audiences you get for World Championships and World Cups.
So that's interesting. Yeah. So many of the buildings were not going to be new creations in order to reduce some of the costs. So they'll have to look at whether they can keep those. And Scott Russell and I, Mr. Pound, were talking about the World Championships, maybe taking over some of the World Championships for athletics or for swimming or what have you, not holding those in 2021, but giving over that time and space to an Olympic Games. So these are some of the kinds of things, I guess, that you'll be having to work out. And the qualification process, I would assume, as well. Or will they just carry on once they've qualified for this summer? Does that continue, or is that a question mark?
Well, it's an interesting question, because somebody who qualified in 2020 may get surpassed by some young up-and-comer by 2021, and who will say, well, wait a minute, now I'm better than you are and were. Maybe I should be involved in this. So that's another negotiation point with not only the international federations, but probably also the National Olympic Committees.
Obviously, many details yet to be worked out. I'm wondering, in terms of the financial implications, this is a multi-billion-dollar prospect for Tokyo. What are the financial implications of postponing?
Well, I think that's to be seen, and it'll be part of the discussions that we have. I mean, some things can be, like the television revenues, they'll be postponed. They're not going to be lost. They're just, it'll be a timing issue. If Tokyo has to unwind some of the contracts that they've entered into for facilities, that will have to be discussed. And if there are extra costs, where will they fall, or will they be shared by Tokyo, by the organizing committee, by the government, by the IOC? Who knows? But what's important is the certainty that nobody's going to have to be traveling and competing in a situation where this virus is really out of control.
You're exactly in sync with the head of the Tokyo 2020, the organizing committee, who just said moments ago it's not clear who will pay the extra cost for the Olympics delay. These are part of the discussions. There was an indication that the IOC would decide finally within this 4-week window it was talking about yesterday. Apparently what we're hearing again from Tokyo 2020 is there will be details released, but they're no longer going to be constrained by this 4-week window. They'll just have to work them out as expeditiously as they possibly can. I am wondering, I have a number of questions that I'm still wondering. When you said it is the right thing, that it was a tough call to make, it seemed like it was the only call to make, and yet the IOC was resisting making the call. Can you give us any indication or share what has been going on inside the scenes or inside the IOC, the pressure that was perhaps under you or on you and on Thomas Bach, the president, who seemed at times to be tone deaf to the growing international concern about whether this should go ahead?
Well, one of the things you have to do in a situation like this is to make sure you've got good information. And our relationships with the World Health Organization and some of the specialized agencies have been established, been ongoing. We've been monitoring these things every day. But at a certain point, in a quickly moving situation like this, when that curve of new cases starts to rise and become almost a vertical shape, you've got to be able to respond quickly to that. And so we hoped that the disease would be controlled, but a lot of countries have not apparently taken it seriously enough soon enough, and it is now, we're looking at something that probably could rival the Spanish flu back at the end of World War I. This is not a fun thing at the moment. So
the IOC finally looking at those numbers and the trending had to make that move. I want to bring in a couple of bits of reaction from Canadians, notably from Hayley Wickenheiser, whom you know well, Mr. Pound. She just tweeted this morning how happy she was to hear that Tokyo 2020 has moved to 21 and called it the best case scenario under the circumstances. She was one of the first athletes to go public to express her concerns about the Games being held, and she with the force of a 6-time Olympic athlete. And then we had from Team Canada and the COC that Canada would not send its athletes to Tokyo if the Games were going ahead this summer. Other countries have rapidly followed suit. I'm wondering, as a Canadian, but also on the IOC, about Canada's role in all of this, what you've thought about Canada's positions as its athletes and officials have taken, and perhaps to what extent there may be some influence over what has taken place.
That's kind of hard to say. I was not at the Canadian Olympic Committee meeting on that. I was traveling back from Florida. That decision came after the IOC had essentially signaled that this is what was going to happen. That those communications on Sunday, one addressed primarily to the athletes and the other to the world at large, made it clear that they didn't want to cancel, and everyone knew that. And they have now realized that they're probably not going to be able to have it in July of 2020. So that leaves the P word out there, postponement. And I think that was the signal that had been given. So that makes the Canadian and the Australian positions much more understandable and frankly easier to take. I think they would have been expressed somewhat differently had they not known that the IOC had already acted. They would have said, well, we're looking, but we're very worried and so forth. But we'll decide as the time gets close. Now, with the acceleration of that, I think that made it possible for the Prime Minister to come on and indicate that he agreed with that decision, and for the Australians to do much the same thing. So I think in a fast-moving situation, everybody should share the credit for what I think is the right decision, and we don't have to go and point fingers at anybody other than, perhaps some of the governments who haven't taken all this very seriously soon enough.
In Montreal with us this morning, Dick Pound, Canada's longtime IOC member and someone who has been accessible on this story as he is on so many. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the time today. Good to see you, and thank you.